I never thought betrayal could feel like drowning. One moment, I was on the hospital bed, counting down the seconds before anesthesia took over. The cold, sterile air of the operating room sent chills down my spine, but I told myself everything would be fine. My parents were outside, waiting anxiously. My little sister, Emily, had promised to pray for me. I was scared, but I believed I mattered. I believed they cared. Until I woke up. I expected pain, I was prepared for that. What I wasn't prepared for was the deafening silence. No warm hands clutching mine, no worried whispers, no relief in their voices. Just the rhythmic beeping of machines and an overwhelming emptiness in the room. I turned my head toward the door, my throat dry, my heart pounding. I strained to hear something, anything. Then, I heard it. Laughter. Cheerful, almost celebratory. It was coming from outside my hospital room. Weakly, I pushed myself up, my vision swimming. Through the small glass window in the door, I saw them, my parents, my relatives, even Emily. Their faces were lit up, not with relief for my survival, but with joy. And then I saw why. In Emily's hands was a golden trophy, gleaming under the fluorescent hospital lights. My mother was hugging her tightly, tears in her eyes. My father clapped proudly, his voice thick with emotion. I could barely comprehend it. I had nearly died. I had spent hours in surgery, my body weak, my mind foggy. And instead of worrying about me, instead of being at my bedside, they were celebrating. Celebrating Emily's win at a gymnastics competition. A sob clawed its way up my throat, but I swallowed it down. My own parents, they hadn't even checked on me. Hadn't held my hand, hadn't whispered that they were glad I was alive. I was nothing more than a shadow in my own family. A disposable afterthought. As I laid back down, staring at the ceiling, one thing became painfully clear: if I had died on that operating table, they would have mourned me for a day, maybe two, but nothing would have stopped them from celebrating Emily's trophy. And in that moment, something inside me broke. Growing up, I always knew I was second place. My parents weren't cruel, not in the obvious ways. They didn't hit me or scream at me. No, their form of neglect was much more subtle, much more painful. It was in the way their eyes would light up at Emily's achievements while barely acknowledging mine. It was in the way they spoke about her with such pride, as if she were a rare diamond, while I was just there. Emily was their miracle child. She was born 7 years after me, a baby my mother prayed endlessly for after struggling with infertility. When she arrived, it was as if the entire universe revolved around her. Every breath she took, every step, every little achievement was met with applause. And me? I was just the responsible one. The one expected to understand when they missed my school plays because Emily had a gymnastics meet. The one told me to be happy for her when my birthdays were overshadowed by her competitions. I should have been used to it. But that didn't mean it hurt any less. I still remember one particular day when I was 12. I had spent weeks working on a science project, a model of the solar system. I was so proud of it, sure that my parents would finally notice my efforts. The night before the school exhibition, I placed it carefully on the dining table, eager to show them in the morning. But when I woke up, it was gone. Panic gripped me as I searched the house, my heart hammering. Then, I saw it, crushed under a pile of Emily's leotards and gym bags near the trash. My mother barely glanced at me when I asked about it. Oh, I thought it was just some old thing. Emily needed space for her things, honey. You'll make another one, right? She hadn't even asked. She hadn't even noticed how much it meant to me. That was the moment I realized something important. In this family, I wasn't the star. I wasn't the golden child. I was the background character in a story that wasn't mine. And yet, despite everything, I still loved them. I still craved their validation. I told myself that one day, I'd do something to make them proud. Something so big they couldn't possibly ignore me. But I was wrong. Because even on the day I almost died, they still found a way to make it about Emily. As I lay in that hospital bed, the memory of every ignored achievement, every stolen moment, every discarded effort came rushing back. It was like watching my entire childhood on a loop, except now, I saw it for what it truly was. I was nothing more than a convenience. A placeholder in their world of golden trophies and gymnastics medals. And for the first time in my life, I stopped caring. I stopped waiting for their approval. I stopped believing that one day they would choose me. Because now, I understood the truth. They never would. The realization sat in my chest like a lead weight. Lying in that hospital bed, staring at my family celebrating Emily's trophy like it was the most important thing in the world, something inside me finally snapped. I turned my head to the side, blinking away the sting of tears. Maybe I had been naive to believe things would ever change. Maybe I had spent too many years clinging to the idea that if I worked hard enough, if I achieved enough, they would finally see me. But they never would. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. A nurse peeked inside, offering me a small smile. "Oh, good, you're awake. Your surgery went well, but you need to take it easy for a few days." She glanced at the untouched water on my bedside table. "Feeling okay? Do you need me to call your family?" I almost laughed. "My family." I forced a smile. "No, they're busy." Her smile faltered slightly, and for a brief second, I wondered if she had seen what I saw. If she had noticed the way my parents hadn't rushed to my side, the way they had left me alone while they celebrated my sister. "I'll let the doctor know you're awake," she said before stepping out. I let my head fall back against the pillow, exhaustion creeping over me. My body ached, my chest was heavy, but the worst pain wasn't physical. It was the kind that came from knowing the people who were supposed to love you the most didn't even care. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the muffled laughter from outside. Then I heard it. A voice. My mother's voice. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the words cut through the hallway, sharp and clear. "I was so worried Emily wouldn't win today," she sighed. "After all the money we put into her training, we needed this win." My father chuckled. "Well, she pulled it off. That's all that matters. She's the future of this family. The future of this family." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Now we're so relieved she's okay. Now I was worried about her surgery. Just Emily won. Emily is the future. I gripped the sheets, my nails digging into the fabric. How had I been so blind? They hadn't just favored Emily all these years. They had outright dismissed me. And in their eyes, I was nothing. I didn't even realize I was shaking until my phone beeped, signaling an increase in my heart rate. The sound must have alerted someone, because the door swung open and Emily peeked inside. "Oh," she said, blinking in surprise. "You're awake." Something about the casual way she said it, like she had just noticed my existence, made my stomach twist. I swallowed down my anger. "Yeah. I guess my surgery wasn't that important, huh?" Emily rolled her eyes and stepped into the room, holding her trophy against her chest like it was a newborn baby. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. You were fine. The doctors said it wasn't even a life-threatening surgery." I clenched my fists. "So that means it didn't matter?" She sighed, clearly impatient. "Look, I get that you want attention or whatever, but today was really important for me. Do you know how hard I've worked for this?" She lifted the trophy slightly. "This is a huge deal. Colleges are watching me now. Mom and Dad. Mom and Dad don't care about anything but your gymnastics," I cut in, my voice colder than I intended. She looked taken aback, but only for a moment. Then, she smirked. Well, maybe you should have picked something you were good at, too. I felt my breath catch. There it was. The truth I had always suspected but never wanted to hear. Emily saw herself as better than me. My parents saw her as more valuable than me. And the worst part? They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. She tilted her head, as if trying to read my expression. "Oh, come on," she said with a laugh. "Don't be mad. You've always been the boring one, the responsible one. That's your thing, right?" She gestured toward my hospital bed. "And, well, it's not like you were actually dying." I felt something inside me crack. I had spent my entire life trying to be a good sister. I had cheered for her, celebrated her wins, let my own achievements fade into the background. I had sacrificed so much for this family, hoping that one day they'd see me as an equal. But now, staring at the girl who had taken everything from me, my parents' love, my place in this family, I realized something. I would never be enough for them. And for the first time in my life, I didn't want to be. I didn't want their validation. I didn't want their fake affection. I wanted something else. I wanted to show them exactly what they had done to me. Emily must have noticed the shift in my expression because she sighed dramatically and placed her trophy on the bedside table. "Fine," she said. "I'll tell Mom and Dad to come see you, okay? But don't expect them to stay long. They're still talking to Coach about my next competition." With that, she turned and walked out. I stared at the trophy, my mind racing. For years, I had been the quiet one, the understanding one. I had swallowed my pain, convinced myself that someday, I would matter to them. But now? Now, I was done being second place. And they were about to find out exactly what that meant. The day I was discharged from the hospital, something inside me had already shifted. I didn't complain when my parents showed up 2 hours late, their faces still glowing with pride over Emily's win. I didn't flinch when my mother barely looked at me before asking Emily if she had scheduled her next practice. I just nodded, smiled, and told them I was fine. And for the first time, I realized they didn't care whether that was true or not. The car ride home was unbearable. My father talked about sponsorship opportunities for Emily. My mother gushed over how blessed they were to have such a talented daughter. Emily sat in the back seat next to me, scrolling through her phone, basking in the praise like a queen on her throne. No one asked how I was feeling. No one even acknowledged what I had just gone through. By the time we reached home, my decision had been made. That night, I locked myself in my room, my fingers shaking as I pulled out my laptop. If they wouldn't see me willingly, I'd make them see me. I opened a blank document and started typing. The truth about my family, by the forgotten daughter. I spilled everything. The years of neglect. The constant dismissal. The way they had thrown away my achievements like trash while treating Emily like a prize-winning racehorse. I wrote about the science project incident. The birthdays they forgot. The way they left me alone in a hospital room while celebrating a trophy. And then, I wrote about Emily. I wrote about her cruel little smirks, the way she knew she was the favorite and used it against me. The way she looked me in the eye and told me I was the boring one. The one who didn't matter. By the time I was done, my hands were trembling. I reread the document, my heart pounding in my chest. Should I do it? Should I actually post it? I hesitated, but then my mind flashed back to the hospital. The sound of their laughter as I lay there, alone. And just like that, my doubt disappeared. I copied the text into an anonymous blog and hit publish. The post exploded overnight. I woke up to find thousands of comments. People were furious on my behalf, calling out my parents' favoritism, sharing their own stories of being the invisible child. Some even tried to guess who I was, piecing together the clues. I hadn't expected it to go viral. And I definitely hadn't expected my family to see it. It happened during dinner. We were halfway through a tense, quiet meal when my father's phone buzzed. Then my mother's. Then Emily's. I watched as my mother frowned at the screen, her eyes scanning rapidly. My father's face twisted into something unreadable. Emily's grip on her phone tightened. The room turned ice cold. Then, my mother slowly looked up at me. "Did you write this?" she asked, her voice dangerously low. I didn't flinch. "Yes." The silence was suffocating. Emily slammed her phone onto the table. "Are you insane?" she shrieked. "Do you have any idea what you've done? People are calling Mom and Dad abusive. My sponsors." "Oh, you mean the sponsors who only care about your Golden Girl status?" I shot back. "Guess they're getting a little reality check." My father's face darkened. "You made us look like monsters." I laughed, actually laughed. "No. You did that all on your own. I just wrote it down." My mother's lips trembled, her face going pale. "Why would you do this to us?" I set my fork down carefully. "Because for years, I waited for you to see me. To love me the way you love Emily. And you never did." I leaned forward, my voice deadly calm. "But now? The whole world sees me." I expected screaming. I expected them to lash out. But instead, my father stood up, his face unreadable. He turned to my mother, then to Emily. "We need to do damage control. Just like that. No apology. No guilt. Just damage control." I swallowed the lump in my throat. I didn't know what I had expected. Maybe some part of me had hoped this would wake them up. That they would finally realize how much they had hurt me. But they hadn't. And they never would. Emily was shaking with anger. "You're going to regret this." I met her gaze, my voice steady. "No. I won't. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the forgotten daughter. I was the one who held the power." The next few days were absolute chaos. My parents tried everything to fix the damage. First, they denied it. They told their friends, family, and anyone who asked that the blog was a lie, a childish outburst from a bitter, attention-seeking daughter. But the internet never forgets. People dug deeper. They found old family photos where I was always pushed to the side, barely acknowledged. They found my school records, straight A's, scholarships, achievements that had never been celebrated the way Emily's trophies were. They compared it to Emily's interviews, where she gushed about how her parents had sacrificed everything for her career. The truth was out. And the world wasn't buying their lies anymore. Then came phase 2, guilt-tripping. My mother knocked on my door late at night, her voice soft, almost pleading. "Honey, you've embarrassed us. People are judging our parenting. Do you have any idea what this is doing to our reputation?" I stared at her, emotionless. Their reputation. That's what she cared about. Not my pain, not my years of neglect, just how they looked to other people. I should have felt hurt. I didn't. Instead, I said, "Did you ever think about what it did to me?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Because she didn't have an answer. I closed the door in her face. The final straw came the next day. I woke up to find Emily sitting on my bed, her arms crossed. Her face was pale, her usual confidence replaced with something unfamiliar, fear. "You need to take it down," she said, her voice sharp but unsteady. "Now." I sat up slowly, staring at her. "Or what?" Emily swallowed, gripping her phone like it was a lifeline. "You don't understand what you've done. Sponsors are dropping me. Colleges are backing out. My reputation. I laughed. Actually laughed. Your reputation? I echoed. What about my life? My entire childhood was spent living in your shadow, forgotten, ignored. But now that it's you facing consequences, suddenly it's a problem. Her jaw tightened. I didn't make them treat you that way. I tilted my head. No. But you never cared that they did. She flinched. And for the first time, I saw it. A flicker of realization in her eyes. For years, she had basked in the spotlight, never once questioning why I was always standing in the dark. But now that she was the one losing something, she was finally feeling a fraction of what I had endured my whole life. I'm sorry, she muttered. It was so quiet, so unlike her, that I almost thought I imagined it. But I didn't let it affect me. Not anymore. Good, I said, my voice firm. Then live with it. She stared at me, waiting, maybe hoping I'd take it back, that I'd erase the post, make everything go back to the way it was. But I wouldn't. Because I was finally free. And I wasn't going to disappear again. The house felt different after that night. No more fake smiles. No more pretending. For the first time in my life, my parents saw me, but not in the way I had once wanted. Now, they looked at me with resentment, as if I had ruined something precious. As if I had broken the perfect illusion they had carefully crafted. Maybe I had. But I didn't regret it. The fallout. My parents tried one last desperate move. They called a family meeting, sitting me down like I was some rebellious child who needed to be taught a lesson. My father, usually calm and controlled, was furious. My mother looked tired, as if she had aged 10 years overnight. We've done everything for you, my father started, his voice tight with restrained anger. And this is how you repay us? Everything for me? I almost laughed. Instead, I leaned back in my chair. Name one thing. My mother gasped. Excuse me? Name one time you put me first. One time you celebrated me the way you did Emily. One time you made me feel like I was more than just a backup dancer in your perfect little family show. Silence. Not because they didn't want to answer. Because they couldn't. I nodded, standing up. That's what I thought. Emily sat across from me, unusually quiet. She had been different since our conversation in my room. Less arrogant. More uncertain. For a second, I wondered if she finally understood. If she finally realized that her golden pedestal had been built on my sacrifices. But if she did, she didn't say it. Instead, my father exhaled sharply. You're being ridiculous. You know we love you. I smiled. Not because I believed him. But because I finally didn't need his love anymore. The final decision. The moment dinner ended, I went upstairs, grabbed my suitcase, and started packing. I didn't tell them I was leaving. I didn't ask for their permission. Because I didn't need it. When my mother saw me dragging my suitcase down the stairs, she paled. What are you doing? I zipped up my bag. Leaving. Leaving? And where exactly do you think you're going? My father demanded. Away from here, I said simply. Away from you. Panic flickered in my mother's eyes. You can't just walk out. This is your home. I shook my head. No. It never was. Emily sat at the kitchen table, staring at her phone, pretending she wasn't listening. But I knew she was. For the first time in years, I was choosing myself. And it felt incredible. Freedom. I moved out that night. I didn't have much, a suitcase full of clothes, my laptop, a few savings I had tucked away. But I had peace. And for the first time, that was enough. I stayed with a friend while I looked for an apartment. My blog? It kept growing. People reached out, sharing their own stories, their own pain. I wasn't alone. I had never been alone. My parents? They tried to control the narrative. They told family members I was going through a phase. That I would come back once I realized how much I needed them. They were wrong. Because I never went back. Emily sent me a text once. I didn't know you felt that way. I'm sorry. I stared at the message for a long time. Maybe she meant it. Maybe she didn't. But I wasn't looking for an apology. I was looking for a new life. So I put my phone down, stepped outside, and let the past stay exactly where it belonged, behind me. And for the first time in my life, I was truly, finally free.